Today we are doing our first live stream experiment. We are doing a live deck building, Edric Spymaster of Trest. So, now all the cords are going to get all jumbled up, but I can't seem to realign this app. So bear with me. We have these minor technical issues. Let's see if I can't adjust the tripod to still get the shot that I had originally designed. All right. So, why is upside down on? What we got here? Minor technical difficulties. In case you didn't know, this is our maiden voyage here on live Twitch. So we are going to go ahead and get this set up. It's continuing to auto-rotate. So no matter how I do this, it rotates it so that the shot is upside down. I'm not sure why. Why is that, Twitch? Can you explain it to me? Can anyone in chat give me a little heads up on this? Okay. Well then, we're going to try this one more time to rotate the shot. Bear with me. Eventually, we're going to be looking to do this simulcast on both YouTube and Twitch. But for the time being, we are making it work. Okay, so a little bit of background information. I have been planning to build this deck for some time now. It's one that I wanted to do because A, I know that it's one of the top tier decks in the format, and B, it uses a lot of cards that I just happen to have extras of in my singles. So in my enduring quest to master every deck archetype, which you guys will be following along with, I went ahead and got to work on this. I ordered the cards a while back, and whether or not, yeah, that looks good. Whether or not we're going to have everything we need here is still somewhat of a question. So what I'm going to do is go through it today, put together a rough draft of the deck, do 90% of it here and now, and then if I like the way it comes out, if it needs a little bit of refining, etc., etc., we'll do a deck tech on the finished result on our YouTube channel. In the meantime, as I'm tinkering with this, if anybody has any feedback, any questions as to my strategy decisions, add any card ideas, go ahead and throw them in. All right, so let's get started. Microphone cord. Okay, so first up, By the way, this being my first time streaming, the lag between me fidgeting with the camera and what we're seeing live on Twitch is a little disorienting. it's it's interesting to see. Okay, so let's give it a go, huh? Right here we have the card divider for my Azuri Claw of Progress deck box that I bought for the deck. It's Simic. I thought that would be perfect. And a big pile of cards I have set aside for it. Let's go through a few of these. First and foremost, our commander is Edric, Spymaster of Trest. He is 3 mana, 1 colorless, green-blue, 2/2, legendary elf, rogue. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may draw a card. So there's a political aspect to this card. It incentivizes everyone else at the table to attack your opponents rather than you. They get that additional incentive. And then on top of that, there's the ability for you to get card advantage every time you get a creature through. So the goal here is to have lots of damage sources, lots of evasive creatures, and then take advantage of that with either tempo or combos to finish everyone off. So let's take a look at what we have here. I'm just going to sort through the cards. Good example is our first card, Faerie Miscreant, right on the top of the pile. Now these are mostly cards that I just pulled from my collection. I ordered a few recently. They came in about 2 weeks ago. I've been putting off building this deck while I worked on the technology to set this up. Obviously, there are still some bugs I'd like to work out, but this is going to be a regular part of the channel going forward, without a doubt. And if it's anything like our YouTube streams, the quality is just going to skyrocket from here. Regardless, here we have Faerie Miscreant. 1 drop for a blue mana, 1/1. Faerie Rogue. Has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, if you control another creature named Faerie Miscreant, draw a card. Now, we're not really looking at that second ability. The point of this card is just the sheer economy of it. We're looking at 1/1 flyer for 1, which is going to be an evasive threat. We can sneak through damage and start drawing cards every turn. Every single evasive creature is a repeatable card draw engine. So not only are we getting damage across the board, but we're getting card advantage every single turn. That's why we're going to have a ton of these little creatures here. In fact, let's go through some of them. And as I go through them, I'm going to sort them into different piles. Because when you build an EDH deck, you want to have certain categories that you have to fill in every EDH deck. You want to have removal. You want to have at least 10 removal spells. Typically 5 board wipes, 5 single target removal spells. And then you want to have 10 card draw, 10 mana ramp, and about 28 cards for your specific strategy. Of course, this varies. Some decks you're more aggressive with your removal. Some decks you're more aggressive with card draw. This deck, the entire deck is card draw because of our commander. So I'm going to have less cards that specifically draw cards on their own. I'm going to have more cards that, you know, I just try and sneak through damage. That gives me a lot of extra breathing room in the deck construction. So here we have Cloud Sprite, 1 mana, 1/1 flying fairy, and it may block only creatures with flying. That's fine. I don't ever plan to be on the defensive with this deck. This is going to be a very fast commander deck. very low curve. And I'm going to put this in our evasive threats pile. Next up is a new card from Rivals of Exelon, just released last Friday. I actually pulled this in our pre-release cards that you can check out our video on YouTube of my Planeswalker deck unboxings. It is actually a big hit in Standard right now, if you've been following the Star City Games tournaments that were this weekend. This was a key piece in the new merfolk deck that came in 9th place. So very exciting that merfolk tribal is breaking into Standard. It's 1 blue mana, 1/1 merfolk warrior, miscloaked herald, can't be blocked. So what I'm going to do additionally on top of sorting this based on our 4 categories, I'm going to make 2 more piles. I'm going to make the flying threats that are evasive, and I'm going to make the unblockable threats piles, because I'm going to prioritize things that are just straight up unblockable in deck construction. Of course, we have Cloud of Fairies, classic combo card. We're not really going to use it for combo shenanigans. This is just straight up value. 2 mana, 1/1 flying fairy. When it comes into play, untap up to 2 lands, and it has cycling for 2. So in a pinch, it can be discarded to draw a card, or you've just got the value of getting another evasive flyer on the board effectively for free. That's fantastic. Not to mention, you're going to see a fairy sub-theme in this deck, because we are looking to take advantage of, here it is, Spell Stutter Sprites. 2 mana, 1 colorless, and a blue, 1/1 flying fairy wizard with flash. When Spell Stutter Sprite enters the battlefield, counter target spell with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of fairies you control. So I decided early on, and this is typical of Edric decks, that I wanted to get a lot of fairies in play very quickly so that I can counter spells and get the value of playing another evasive creature. So that's going to be a key piece of the deck. So we are going to prioritize fairies over other flyers as well. Here's a new card from Rivals of Exelon, Kitesail Corsair. 2 mana, 2/1 human pirate that has flying as long as it's attacking. So there's good economy there, getting a 2/1 flyer as long as you're attacking. And this is going to be a very aggressive deck because I don't draw cards from sitting around and blocking. So I like that card. Scarab Sprites. This is our first green card. It's 1 green for a 1/1 flying fairy. Classic card, perfect for this deck. Zephyr Sprite. 1 blue mana for a 1/1 flying fairy. And our first piece of disruption coming up in this pile is Rewind. It's 4 mana, 2 colorless, 2 blue, instant, counter target spell, untap up to 4 lands. So later in the game, when we get a little bit more mid-range, this is effectively free counterspell, which is great value. I'm looking forward to taking advantage of that in this deck. I see Aaron Rhett has found me. Welcome to the channel. And here we have Misdirection. And for everyone else who's looking to find more of our content, we have a great presence on YouTube. Feel free to look up our Rivals of Exelon set reviews and unboxings. We also have deck techs and obviously deck construction videos coming up. Misdirection is another potentially free control effect. It costs 5 mana, that's 3 colorless, blue, for an instant, that rather than pay its mana cost, I can discard a blue card from my hand. I should have plenty of card advantage. Change the target of target spell with a single target. This is great for redirecting opponent's removal, because you'll find that people who know EDH know the power of Edric, and therefore he's going to be quite a lightning rod. This is a way for you to not only get value from effectively countering a single target removal spell pointed at him, but at the same time you can use it to nix off somebody else's threat. So that's a good card. It's going to work just fine in the deck. I'm going to move these piles a little bit so that we have a little bit of room to breathe. Imagine the flyers. I want to keep Edric prevalent on the screen here, but I imagine the flyers are going to be a pretty big pile by the time we're done. Here's our first mana ramp card. Boreal Druid. Now, when it comes to mana ramp, we have a specific standard. We want to be able to... I like your suggestion there, Pineapple, Twitch TV. Triumph of the Hordes is going to be one of our best kill conditions in this deck, without a doubt. So, when it comes to mana ramp, we're trying to drop the mana ramp turn 1 so that we can get Edric out turn 2. Boreal Druid is not only a creature, and will favor creatures because they just become attackers once we get our Edric online, but you could drop him turn 1. He is a 1/1 snow creature, elf druid, and you can tap him to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, potentially allowing you to drop Edric on turn 2. So mana ramp will get its own pile here. This is a new addition from Exelon, Siren Storm Tamer. 1 blue, 1/1, Siren Pirate Wizard. It has all of the types. It has flying, and you can pay 1 blue, sacrifice Siren Storm Tamer, counter target spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control. So this is going to be... Not only does that provide us a 1/1 flyer, but it provides us utility. There are better mana dorks. We're just going through some initial singles right now. John Smith had, where we're going to whittle this down throughout the stream. Now, hope of... Stream's gonna get me for this. Gariper is a 1 colorless, 1/1 legendary artifact creature Thopter with flying. You could sacrifice it until your next turn. Target player who has was dealt damage by this card can't cast non-creature spells. So that's a great way to shut down somebody who's bothering you with removal, counter spells, those type of things. And artifacts, really. Good value card. I think I'm going to get a lot of use out of that. Silhana Ledgewalker. 2 mana, 1/1, Elf Rogue. Can't be blocked except by creatures with flying, so pseudo-flying. And has hexproof. So that's going to be one of our more enduring threats. Like it. Good old Lurker. 1 mana, 1/1 salamander that cannot be blocked. It has Megamorph. I don't know if I'm going to use that a lot just because it takes away from the efficiency of the card, effectively spending 4 mana to get a 2/2 unblockable. But if the game runs long, which it shouldn't with Edric, that's always a possibility. More value. But most importantly, it cannot be blocked under any circumstance. It's not just evasive. So that's going to go in our higher priority pile. Hypnotic Siren. 1 mana, 1/1 enchantment creature Siren with flying. It also has Bestow, but I'm never going to use that. Now we've got some more... Now we've got Disdainful Stroke. This is some more disruption. It's a 2 mana, 1 colorless, 1 blue, instant, counter target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Since we're building an EDH deck, we're going to see a lot of spells 4 or greater, so this makes a lot of sense. It's good value. And then we've got Arcane Denial. Same casting cost. This one's just a hard counter, but that caster may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. And then I get to draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So it replaces itself. Reality Shift. Now this is potential card advantage for your opponent, much like Arcane Denial. Realistically though, with Edric on the board, everyone's going to have a lot of card advantage. You just want to be able to slice through your opponents fast enough that they don't get to take advantage of it as much as you would. I like this just as a tempo play and straight up disruption. It's 2 mana, 1 colorless and a blue, instant, exile target creature. That alone is solid, especially in blue. Its controller manifests the top card of his or her library. So I like that one a lot. This is probably going to be the worst card that I show you today, but I think it's just cute enough to be worthy of consideration. It's Aether Mutation. 5 mana, 3 colorless, green-blue, sorcery. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Put X 1/1 green sapling creature tokens into play, where X is the converted mana cost of the target. So 5 mana isn't great value for just a bounce spell, but the fact that I'm going to get bodies on the board and I can turn those bodies into potential card draw engine later on, I think there's definitely a very high end. Is it Magical Christmas Land? That's going to require some testing. I think it's at least worth consideration. So for now, it's in the pile, in the disruption pile. Along with the old classic, Counterspell. 2 mana, 2 blue, instant counter target spell. We also have Trigon Predator. This is going to be one of our more expensive creatures. It's 3 mana, 1 colorless, green-blue, 2/3 flying beast. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. So he's a flyer, he's disruption, he could draw us cards. He kind of does everything for us, and that's why I really like this card in an Edric deck. I'll put this in the disruption pile for now. I'm going to scoot these piles up a little bit. We'll definitely be whittling this down. Every deck should have additional kill conditions, just in the event that, say, this deck you're going to be dealing regular damage most of the time. What if you're up against, you know, a life gain deck that's outpacing you in life gain? Well, that's where the poison counters come in from previous suggestion in chat. And every EDH deck should have some surprise kill condition in there. So that's why it's going to be an important part of the deck. Next up we have Void Shatter. 3 mana, 1 colorless blue instant with the Void. It has no color. Not really relevant on this card. It's just another counter spell. If it's countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. That's good for avoiding graveyard shenanigans. Treetop Scout. 1 green mana, 1/1. Can't be blocked except by creatures with flying. So this is going to be a solid flyer. Oh, it's an elf, which is non-trivial. Patagia Viper. What's going on here? Next up we have Patagia Viper. It's 4 mana, 3 colorless, and a green 2/1 flying snake. When it comes into play, put 2 1/1 green and blue snake creature tokens into play. When it comes into play, sacrifice it unless you pay blue to play it. So this is a little army in a can, which makes me like it. I'm going to see about doing a slight tweak to I can't make adjustments to my Wi-Fi while we're streaming, so I might change the connection for our next stream. Today, everyone's going to have to bear with me on my 4G LTE connection. Next up, we have River's Rebuke. This is a much more expensive card, potentially devastating. Kind of a poor man's Cyclonic Rift. I appreciate this being referred to as epic deck building in chat. Our River's Rebuke is 6 mana, 4 colorless, blue sorcery, return all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hands. This is going to be probably the most expensive spell on the deck outside of actual overloaded Cyclonic Rift. This is not as good as Cyclonic Rift, but it's definitely a big FU to whoever you target with this. So I think it's worthy of consideration. It might get cut later in the video, but you'll have to stay tuned to find out. Dismiss. Classic value card. 4 mana, 2 colorless, blue, instant, counter target spell, draw a card. So it's a counter spell. It's a hard counter spell that replaces itself. Little on the expensive side, even for this deck. Spell Pierce. 1 blue, instant, counter target non-creature spell, unless its controller pays 2 colorless mana. This is a really good spell to avoid removal, to avoid being countered. It also messes with artifact decks, aura decks, you name it. I like this card for a lot of reasons. The pay 2 mana is very easily done after a couple turns in EDH. So you're going to have to be choosy about when you play this, but because this is such a fast, aggressive deck, and most people aren't going to be overly concerned when the blue player leaves 1 island untapped at the end of his turn, it could still surprise people. And for that reason alone, I think it's worth playing. Remember when this was a $10 card because it saw so much modern play? It's worth 25 cents now. Really needed a reprint back then, and then it's been reprinted a bunch of times since. Modern Masters 2017, Exelon just recently as a common. Jeez. Dissolve, very reminiscent of Void Shatter. It's a 3 mana, 1 colorless, blue instant, counter target spell, and scry 1. So you get a pseudo card draw there. This guy I got in the Jace versus Chandra Japanese deck, and I'll be honest, I don't exactly remember what he does. So I've got my handy dandy laptop here. Let's look him up. If chat knows, go ahead and shoot me a line. I do remember when I was going through my cards and I looked him up, he seemed like the perfect fit for what I was trying to do. I know that he counters a spell in some way, shape, or form. Let's see. I also have my Ultra Pro Eclipse sleeves for the deck. I will be sleeving this up and playtesting it. so that I can eventually post a deck tech on it on our YouTube channel. Oh, very sensitive. Let's see here. Oop, not that guy. There's only so many creatures in that deck that I don't know right off the top of my head. So, Martyr of Frost. Here we go. He's a 1 mana, 1/1 human wizard. I can reveal X blue cards from my hand, sacrifice him, counter target spell unless its controller pays X. So I like this guy because he's an extra body on the board. He can deal damage, draw me cards, and at the same time, if I ever need to, I can turn him into a counter spell. And with the number of cards I'll have in my hand from Edric, it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to pay that extra mana. So I like this card a lot. I'm putting it in the disruption pile, and it is worth playing. Now, I think you might have noticed there's not a lot of board wipes in here so far, just River's Rebuke. So I threw in some general board wipe cards like Nevinyrral's Disc. 4 mana artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped. I can pay 1. I appreciate the moral support and the cool cards because I can assure you, while this is just a rough draft of the deck, this is one of the top decks in EDH. It's going to be a very, very good card, or very good deck when we're done with it. So, Nevinyrral's Disc enters the battlefield, tapped. You can pay 1, tap it, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. This is going to be my panic button. Plain and simple. If something's going off, keeping me from winning, I start falling behind, which should happen. I should get out ahead faster than everybody else with this deck and be able to stay ahead. But somebody manages to mess me up, then Nevinyrral's Disc will give me a nice backup plan. Now this one is kind of a win more card. Chasm Skulker. He's 3 mana, 2 colorless and a blue, 1/1 squid horror. Whenever I draw a card, I put a +1/+1 counter on him. And when he dies, I put X 1/1 squid creature tokens with Island Walk onto the battlefield, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters that was already on him. So the number of cards I'm going to be drawing with this deck should be prolific. And this is going to be a way for the deck to go tall in addition to it already going wide. Not to mention, on top of that, when it does eventually die, it will get targeted with removal. Then I'll be able to still get value by going wide with the 1/1 blue squid creature tokens, and those become even more card draw down the line. So for those reasons, I think it's worth putting a little bit more expensive creature into the deck. This is going to be win more. I'm going to call this pile over here the alternate win condition, because rather than going wide, this is going tall. It's just a good value creature. Wingcrafter may not make the cut because he's a little bit situational. He's 1 blue, 1/1 human wizard with soulbound. As long as Wingcrafter is paired with another creature, both creatures have flying. So he is a human wizard as well, which are non-trivial creature types. Let's see. And he has the ability to jump my Chasm Skulker or Boreal Druid or any of my other mana dorks. Spire Tracer is 1 green mana, 1/1 Elf Scout. Can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. So, sort of a nerfed Treetop Scout, but I like it. It's good value, and one of the few green cards we've seen so far. Cloudfin Raptor. This guy doesn't do a lot on his own. He's just a blue mana, 0/1 bird mutant with flying, and he has Evolve. So whenever I play a creature that has more power or more toughness than him, he gets a +1/+1 counter. Of course, Edric will trigger him, and he'll become a 1/2 flyer if I play Edric afterwards. There's potential for this to be a good value card. Get, 2, 3 +1/+1 counters on him, and then he's going to be one of my bigger flyers for only 1 mana. It just requires that I continue playing cards, but I guess with Edric, I should be able to draw enough cards. We'll see how he does in playtesting. Next up is one of my favorite cards for the deck. The creatures are already evasive, having flying, cannot be blocked, but Bower Passage makes those flying creatures even more evasive. It's a 2 mana, 1 colorless, 1 green enchantment. Creatures with flying can't block creatures you control, which makes it so that my flyers can really only be blocked by something with reach. I like that a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and include it in my win more pile. And then we have a classic card that straight up broke Innistrad Limited, Invisible Stalker. 1 colorless and a blue, 1/1 human rogue with hexproof and unblockable. This is everything we want in the deck for just the right price. Perfect card, instant staple. There's no chance that it's going to get cut. It's perfect. Next, we have a very good card. Jessian Infiltrator, 2 mana, 1 green and a blue, 2/2 human rogue that has unblockable. That's real evasion right there. These creatures are very unlikely to get cut. Here's another army in a can that I'm not sure we're going to fit in the deck, but I thought was worthy of consideration. Shardling Sphinx. 4 colorless mana, 2 blue, 4/4, artifact creature Sphinx with flying. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may put a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying into play. So, a little bit situational, really depends on me having a lot of other artifact creatures. So far, it's just the 1. But even on its own, assuming it can get through, it's going to generate value for me and more creatures to draw me more cards over time. So it's cute. Probably won't make the cut, but worth taking a look at. All right. Looter Ilkor. I love Shadow. If you've ever played with me, you know that I have a white weenie deck that is all Shadow and just shreds through an opponent's life total. And this card is 1 colorless and a blue, 1/1 core rogue with Shadow. Shadow creatures can only block or be blocked by other creatures with Shadow. And then whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, draw a card and discard a card. So you get a free loot with this guy. I think he's great. He's going to wind up going in our unblockables pile, and it's highly improbable that he's going to get cut for any reason. I'm doing all these card introductions now, but when it comes down to whittling this down to 60 cards, that's going to be excruciatingly difficult. When the time comes, it's just going to be brutes. Just brutes. Next up, Spiketail Hatchling. 1 colorless and a blue, 1/1 creature drake with flying. Sacrifice Spiketail Hatchling. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 colorless mana. This is a nice way to force your opponents to play off curve, to sort of slow down their game plan, and once in a while, you can sneak in an important counter spell that can't be countered. It can be stifled per se, but it cannot be countered. Let's see if I can adjust this a bit. Tripod needs a little bit of adjusting. Sky Shroud Ranger, next up on our list. He's 1 green, 1/1 elf. I can tap him, choose a land card from my hand, put it into play this ability only as a sorcery. So finally we're getting back to some mana ramp, some mana dorks. There are, outside of, say, Moxes, there are very few ways for you to ramp something out for 1 mana. He's one of them, and he lets me continue ramping throughout the game as I continue to draw into lands with Edric's ability. I like it. Okay. Next up, we have Abjure. 1 blue, Interrupt, which is basically an instant. Old school cards, ladies and gentlemen, old school. And I can sacrifice a blue permanent, counter target spell. I should have permanents to spare in this deck. So this is just straight value. Pay 1 blue mana, sack one of my extra attackers, and get to counter, just flat out counter a spell. I love this card for this deck. Shrieking Drake is probably not going to make the cut, but I wanted to include him just as another option. He's a 1 mana, 1/1 flying Drake, and when he comes into play, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. While that's doable in this deck, I'm not sure I want to lose the momentum or the tempo. I have plenty of 1/1 creatures. So why do I need to pay an additional 1 in order to get him into play? I don't know. This guy might not make the cut. Oh, going back to our mana ramp, we have 1 green Wild Growth. It's 1 green mana, enchant land. Wild Growth adds 1 green mana to your pool whenever target land is tapped for mana. So this is another way for us to ramp Edric onto the board turn 2, and that's going to be our priority in this deck. Get him out, get him protected, and then just attack a lot. Caustic Caterpillar, 1 green mana, 1/1 insect. I can pay 1 colorless and a green, sacrifice him to destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is going to be a naturalize that we can attack with and draw us cards. So I like it. This is going to be a key piece of our disruption package. Next up, we have Merfolk Spy, 1 blue mana, 1/1 Merfolk Rogue with Island Walk. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, that player reveals a card at random from his or her hand. So the utility of this creature is iffy, right? The utility of this creature is kind of questionable. 1/1 Island Walk is probably the worst evasion ability we've looked at so far. It's not non-trivial. Like, it's not trivial. It's relevant. But what's going to wind up happening is it really depends on how deep I want to go into a merfolk sub-theme. And since we're going to be building a Kamina EDH deck later this week, I'm not sure that this one will make the cut. We shall see. These piles are getting a little untenable, so I'm going to start consolidating them. Here, in the meantime. Now, this next card is an aura. I don't like auras as much because they invite your opponent to 2-for-1 you. And while this deck could technically afford to be 2-for-1, as opposed to... I hope that didn't mess up my camera angle too much. While this deck can technically afford to be 2-for-1, better than most because of the prolific card draw engine that we're going to be facing, I still just, it goes against every fiber of my being to give my opponent that opportunity. It's Robe of Mirrors, 1 blue, enchant aura, enchanted creature has Shroud. Now, you might be thinking, well, Shroud is going to make it so that he dodges single target removal. That's solid. And you're right, it absolutely does. It's, oh, that camera angle is much better. So it absolutely does. But we're playing EDH, and there's just going to be board wipes galore. And when that happens, you're going to lose this aura as well as your Edric, and your opponent gets more value out of it. Unsubstantiate. I guess it really depends on how much I have to protect Edric. Unsubstantiate is 2 mana, 1 colorless, and a blue instant. Return target creature spell or creature to its owner's hand. Just a nice tempo spell. Really great for when people are getting ready to combo off. Target something on the stack, bounce back, keep the attacks coming. I like it. It's definitely going to make the cut. Elvish Visionary. Now we're getting into some actual card draw spells, which is interesting because it really depends on whether or not I can get Edric online and protect him as to whether or not I will need these card draw spells. Elvish Visionary is just a classic. 2 mana, 1 colorless, 1 green, 1/1 Elf Shaman. When he enters the battlefield, draw a card. So you get to draw a card, you could potentially attack with him, continue drawing a card each turn. That's good value. Not even evasive at all, though. I'm just going to put that in the card draw pile. Chart of Course. New card from Exelon. 1 colorless and a blue. Sorcery. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card unless you attacked with a creature this turn. As evasive as all my creatures will be, I should be attacking every single turn. Just period. So yes, I love the old school card frames too. They make me super nostalgic. I've been playing the game for almost 20 years now, and as much as I like the new cards, new card designs, the new things they're doing with the game, every time I see an old school card, it definitely feels like home. So I can appreciate where you're coming from on that. Chart of Course. Potential card draw. Not sure I'll need it, but should work very, very well in this deck. Here's a great kill condition for the deck. Beastmasters Ascension. 3 mana, 2 colorless, and a green enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, you may put a quest counter on Beastmasters Ascension. As long as it has 7 or more quest counters on it, creatures you control get +5/+5, making them all big, deadly threats. I'm going to be cranking out so many little weenies every single turn, just attacking in with a bunch of stuff, drawing a bunch of little weenies, paying 1 or 2 mana to play a bunch more weenies, and keep that cycle going. I should hit that 7 counters on this in 1 turn, maybe 2, real fast. And then all of a sudden, they're super evasive giant monsters that will kill my opponents very quickly. I like this card. This is a instant staple for this type of build. Fencer's Journal is going to be a more expensive version of what we have a few more economical versions of for this deck. It's 5 colorless mana, artifacts, you have no maximum hand size. That's going to be important because I could very quickly start drawing an extra 5-10 cards a turn. So not having to lose those at the end of turn is non-trivial. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, I can gain 1 life for each card in my hand. So that's pretty sweet. Potentially allowing me to prolong the game indefinitely with life gain. That's a cool effect. I'm not sure it's going to stay in just because it's 5 mana. That's more expensive than almost anything else in the deck. We'll see. We'll put that in the win more pile. Bow of Nylea is 3 mana, 1 colorless, green, legendary enchantment artifact. Attacking creatures you control have Death Touch, just to give even more evasion to our evasive creatures. And I can pay 1 colorless and a green, choose 1, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Or Bow of Nylea deals 2 damage to target creature with flying, or you gain 3 life. Or I could put up to 4 creature cards from my library, or from my graveyard on the bottom of my library in any order. So potential repeatable value there. It's kind of a win more card. I'm not sure it's going to make the cut, but just because of the repeatable value, the ability to grow my creatures and ping off utility creatures of my opponent, I like all the modes. I think it's worth considering, and I am going to leave it in the win more pile for now. We'll see if it gets cut when I get to that part of the video. Propaganda is basically to dissuade token builds, or really other go-wide builds that are like ours, from overwhelming my defenses and taking me out of the game. It's 2 colorless and a blue enchantment. Creatures can't attack unless the controller, or attack me, unless the controller pays 2 colorless for each creature he or she controls that is attacking me. So that additional tax is going to be an additional way to dissuade my opponents from hitting me. I like it. There's not going to be many defensive cards in this deck, but it's so economical, it's so classic, and it's so effective that it's worthy of consideration. Probably going to make it into the deck. Coiling Oracle is a value card. 2 mana, green, blue, 1/1, Snake Elf Druid, with all the creature types, or so it would seem. When Coiling Oracle enters the battlefield, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card into your hand. So either I'm getting a 1/1 with permanent mana ramp, or I'm getting a 1/1 and drawing a card. It's good value either way. I'm going to put it in the card advantage pile, although I suppose it could go in the mana ramp. It's a little bit slower than what we wanted in mana ramp because it's not going to help us power out Edric on turn 2. But it's a good value card, worth considering. Memory Lapse. 2 mana, 1 colorless and a blue. Instant, counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, I put it on top of its owner's library instead of its owner's graveyard. So it's a tempo play, but what I like about it is it denies my opponent its next card, or their next card draw as well. So it actually creates a form of card disadvantage for my opponent, and I like that a lot. I probably won't be playing this because they're no longer legal in Commander, but at the time I was putting this together, they were, and this was the perfect card for it. He's Blurry Beeble. He's a silver bordered card, 1 blue, 1/1 artifact creature, cyborg Beeble. He has Blurry. This creature cannot be blocked, or can be blocked only if defending player was wearing glasses as it was cast. So it's potentially unblockable. It's funny. Whenever Blurry Beeble deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So free loot, very economical, potentially unblockable. It's a cute card. So I'll put it in the unblockable pile for now, but I'll probably have to cut it just because if I'm going to ask a playgroup to allow me to play silver bordered cards, it's going to be something that's like integral to the deck, but not OP, like Grimlock or maybe the Sword of Dungeons and Dragons. It's not going to be Blurry Beeble. Sorry. Now we're getting to something that isn't a common or uncommon. Finally, we have our mythic rare, Kruphix, God of Horizons. 5 mana, 3 colorless, green, blue, for a 4/7 legendary enchantment creature god. He is indestructible as long as your devotion to green and blue is less than 7. He isn't a creature, just an enchantment. You have no maximum hand size. If unused mana would empty from your mana pool, that mana becomes colorless instead. So a lot of people run this guy as a mana battery. I will be running him instead for the no maximum hand size. As for the devotion, he should get the devotion relatively easily in this deck. I'm going to be dropping so many cheapy creatures that I should be able to crank out 7 devotion, no problemo. He's still kind of expensive for what we're trying to do in the deck. I don't want to slow down the tempo of the deck too much, so that could be a strike against him, but I'm going to put him in the win more pile. Oh, that's funny. Chat is very funny right now. Praetor's Council, 5 colorless, green, sorcery. Return all cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Praetor's Council. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. This is definitely a win war card. It probably comes too late for our intended strategy, but no maximum hand size always is worth considering, especially the amount of card draw this deck will generate. I'll put it in the win more pile. Probably the top card for us to get cut so far. Maybe after Blurry Beeble. We'll see. Treasure Cruise. Banned in almost every other format, so you know it's good. 7 colorless and a blue sorcery. You will almost never pay all 7 colorless for it because it has Delve. Each card you exile from your graveyard while casting the spell pays for 1 colorless mana. Draw 3 cards. I like to refer to this as the poor man's Ancestral Recall. Yes, it's sorcery speed, but it's 1 blue mana to draw 3 cards. Of course, you have to have cards in your graveyard. That's easy to do. I love this card. I love this card. It pains me every time they ban it. They're right to ban it, but it pains me. I love this card. I've never owned an Ancestral Recall. I had an opportunity to get some, get one a few times. One was beat for like $75. I was willing to do it, and then they turn around. No, I was going to pay $150 for it, which is still awesome value. They turn around. I went to an ATM to get the cash because they wouldn't take my card. They turn around and sold it to some girl for $75 because she got the cute discount. That burned me so bad. I always regret not getting that. Oh well. I don't talk to that card shop anymore. Mystic Remora is 1 blue enchantment, cumulative upkeep of 1 colorless mana. So after the first turn cycle, I have to pay 1 colorless mana. After the second, I have to pay 2. After the third, I have to pay 3 in order to keep this alive. Whenever target opponent successfully casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card. That player may pay 4 colorless mana to counter this effect. So this is really popular in competitive EDH builds. It really nerfs the artifact decks, moxes, sort of super fast ramp that you see in a lot of those decks, and gives you a ton of card advantage early. It's a little tough to sustain with the cumulative upkeep. After, say, the first 2 turns, it really becomes more trouble than it's worth. But for the turns that it's out, especially if you could drop this first turn, you're going to get a ton of card advantage off it. It's definitely worth considering. I'm going to put this in the potentially unnecessary card advantage pile. Speaking of which, we have a classic blue card, Fact or Fiction. 3 colorless and a blue. Instant, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates these cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your graveyard and the other into your hand. Love this card. Classic blue card. I was playing in Invasion when this was in Standard, and it was super broken at the time. If I'm building any blue deck, this is always in consideration. Just period. It's too good not to. I love this card. And I love the new art too. You can see Jace keeping the 2 cards, because typically if there's a 5-3 split in the piles, you can see Jace keeping the 2 cards in his hand and dropping the 3 like you would with Fact or Fiction, the spell itself. So it's very meta. I love it. Always worthy of consideration. Next up, we have 2 of the most classic mana dorks. Elvish Mystic, functional reprint of Land of War Elves. 1 green mana for a 1/1 elf druid. Tap, add a green mana to your mana pool. He's a 1-drop mana dork. He lets me play Edric on turn 2. That's all I really want. Same thing goes for Land of War Elves. Basically the exact same card. Only he's on Dominaria. And I really hope he gets a reprint in Dominaria, just because that would be so perfect. Maybe Findhorn Elves too. They could always use a reprint. Paying $1 for that, these cheapy mana dorks, just frustrates me. The EDH Classic, Sol Ring, because Sol Ring. Probably not going to make the cut, but because I favor mana dorks as potential card draw engines, I threw in Coppermere, 2 colorless mana, 1/1 artifact creature mirror. Tap him, add 1 green mana to your mana pool, and his brother Silvermere. 2 colorless mana, 1/1 artifact creature mirror. Add 1 blue to your mana pool. They come too late to drop Edric turn 2, so that's 2 strikes against them. But I'll keep it in mind. Who knows? Karametra's Acolytes. So this is going to be one of our more high-cost cards, and I'll explain the reasoning why it's in contention once we read the card. It's 3 colorless mana and a green for a 1/4 human druid. I could tap it to add any amount of green mana to my mana pool that equals my devotion to green. I'm going to be cranking out so many cheap cards in this deck that there's going to be a very high ceiling for this card. It will come down a little bit late. I'm not sure that I'll have use for that much mana, but there's going to be very few decks that can take advantage of this as well as this one would. Of course, there's my mono green elf deck, which I will be doing a deck tech for on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned. Feel free to check that out. It is awesome, and this card is great in it, but it has the potential to be great here, so I will take it into consideration. Rampant growth, because color fixing, durability, very few land removal spells in EDH. It's just a solid card. If you're not familiar with Rampant Growth, it's the classic 2 CMC, 1 colorless, 1 green sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. Trying to keep this organized. Now this is a card I really like for this deck. Druid's Repository. 3 CMC, 1 colorless, green enchantment. Whenever a creature I control attacks, put a charge counter on this card. Remove a charge counter from the card to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. That's awesome. So the more this deck gets going, the more I can draw cards from Edric, and then the more mana I have to spit out more weenies. This is going to just really be the kerosene on the fire that of this deck just burning through my opponents. I like it a lot. It is technically mana ramp. I want to put it in the win war pile, but I'm gonna put it in the mana ramp for now. Simic Key Rune probably comes down too late, so it might get cut. What I like about this is because it's 3 colorless mana for an artifact, I can still tap it to add a green or a blue to my mana pool, so there's color fixing there. But I can also pay a green or blue, and it becomes a 2/3 green-blue crab artifact creature with hexproof until end of turn. So it becomes a body that can swing in, draw me a card. It's evasive in the fact that it just becomes a regular artifact and can survive a board wipe. And at the same time, it has hexproof. So it has resiliency. Not so much evasion, but resiliency. It has built-in hexproof. It becomes an artifact, so it's immune to sorcery speed removal. I like it a lot. I just like it a lot. It has a lot of potential. It is a little bit situational, but in those situations, it's a godsend. So it's worthy of consideration. What we got here? This is a little bit of tech that I really like for this deck. If you're familiar with the Sword of Feast and Famine, you know how good these effects are. But with this deck, Sword of Feast and Famine is just a little bit mana inefficient. And this has potential to be even more powerful with this go wide strategy. It's Nature's Will, 4 mana, 2 colorless, green, enchantment. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, tap all lands that player controls and untap all lands you control. So I can drop all my spells in my first main phase, tap down all my opponents so that they don't have counter spells, and then I could just go ahead and untap all my lands and do it all over again in my second main phase. It's very powerful. I like this card a lot. I like this card for the deck a lot. Next up, finally some more disruption. We have Snap from ye old Urza's block. Back when I started playing. Love this card. It's 2 CMC, 1 colorless, 1 blue, instant. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Untap up to 2 lands. A potentially free bounce spell. Great for disrupting your opponent. Especially great if they cheated some big frickin' monster into play. You just can't go wrong with this card. I love it. Rancor. Rancor will be particularly good with cards like Chasm Skulker. It's the classic. The joke with this card is that it was the best rated card on the Gatherer for years and years and years. It's also from Urza's block. 1 green mana, enchant creature. Enchant creature gets +2/+0 and trample. When it's put into the graveyard from play, return Rancor to its owner's hand. Just super value. Super value. Can't go wrong. So I'm going to put this in the win more category. Let's see what happened here. Gotta check something here, folks. Bear with me. That's interesting. So my laptop says I'm not online, but my camera that is live streaming says that I am. So what is going on here? All right, well, first time Twitcher here, so chat, holla if you can hear me. That's really what it really boils down to. Holla if you can hear me. Let me know what's going on, if we've been cut off. Otherwise, I am just going to keep rolling here. Let's see if that helps. Hopefully that didn't mess up the camera angle. No, I like it. All right, so we're going to keep going with Phantom Warrior. He is 3 mana, 1 colorless, blue, 2/2 Illusion Warrior. Phantom Warrior is unblockable. So he's a little more expensive than what we typically would want for this deck, but just being straight up unblockable is the evasion we want for the deck, so he's worthy of consideration. Next is Triton Shorewalker. One blue, 1/1, merfolk rogue, cannot be blocked. Just everything we could want, nothing we don't. And that merfolk tribal is particularly relevant when we're synergizing with, say, River Sneak. 2 mana, 1 colorless, 1 blue, 1/1 merfolk warrior. Cannot be blocked. Those are our magic words here. Okay, thank you, chat. And whenever another merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, River Sneak gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it has the ability to grow when I start dropping Triton Shore Stalker or some of the other merfolk that we had earlier in here. The Miscloak. Oh, sorry about that. Wrong pile. Miscloaked Herald, for example. Good card. very unlikely to get cut. Here's an interesting one from Hour of Devastation. River Hoopoe. 2 mana. Green, blue, 1/3 bird with flying. And it has the ability for me to pay 3 mana, green and blue. You gain 2 life and draw a card. Additional card draw, a little bit of life gain, but it costs so much mana. I highly doubt I'm going to be doing too much of that. Maybe if I get that Karametra's Acolyte online. We'll see. It can be done at instant speed, so I can hold up mana for a counter spell, and then at the end of my opponent's turn, if I still have that mana up, I can just dump it into this guy. And potentially bluff my opponents, which is always nice. But it's really just the value of getting a 1/3 flyer with potential utility. Worthy of consideration here. Should I put this in the card draw pile? What do you think? I'll put it in the card draw pile. Aether Swooper, 2 convert mana cost, 1 colorless, 1 blue, 1/2 Vidalcan Artificer with flying. When he enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever Aether Swooper attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. I like this guy because he's a very mini army in a can. Just getting 2 evasive creatures on the board for 2 mana and potentially drawing me 2 cards per turn. I like that. Okay, so we will put him here. Now when I have to whittle down these evasive creatures, that's probably going to be the toughest part here. Looks like we've got quite a bit of disruption built up here. Going to need to make very few changes to the mana ramp package so far, but these evasive creatures, they're mostly commons and draft chaff from previous sets. It's a River Hoopoe, and it's a bird. And it does have a funny name. I like it a lot. Chat's asking about one of the cards I just featured here. Next up, we're going to take a look at Tattered Haunter. He's 2 convert mana cost, 1 colorless and a blue, 2/1 spirit with flying, and can only block creatures with flying. I'm not looking to be defensive with this deck at all. I need to be swinging in for the engine to run and for me to get the card draw. I need to stay ahead of the game. So I don't worry about the drawback of not being able to block. He's kind of in here just because he's evasive and he deals 2 damage, sort of hastening the clock on my opponents. He might be do too little for the 2-drop spot for me to justify keeping him in here. We'll see when we take a look at our mana curve, when we take a look at, what cards we want to cut. He'll probably be on the short list. It's a fine addition, though. Like, if you don't have some of these other cards, he'll do work for you. This is actually the card that inspired me to build the deck, because in Amonkhet Limited, this guy was the bomb. It's Slitherblade, 1 blue mana, 1/2, Naga Rogue that cannot be blocked. And in Amonkhet Limited, you would just draft as many auras and equipment as possible, and as many of these Slither Blades as possible, and just slice through your opponent's life total. It's awesome. On the Pro Tour, if you watch the Pro Tour coverage for Amonkhet, then there was one particular player that drafted 7 Slither Blades, and he went 3-0 in his pod. Not surprisingly. It's a good card. I wanted to play it in an EDH deck, and Edric seemed like the logical choice. Memnite is just getting more than what you paid for. He's a 0-drop, 1/1 artifact creature. Another body on the board for you to go wide with, start drawing cards. He's not evasive, he's not all that special, he's just raw value. Great combo piece in a lot of artifact decks, though. Overrun is a way for us to get additional kills in. It's 5 mana total, 2 colorless, green, sorcery. Creatures you control get +3/+3, and gain trample until end of turn. Classic from Urza's block. Once I have all those creatures on the board, that +3/+3 will add up very quickly. So I love this card. Will almost certainly make the cut. Obviously the Infect version is better, but I don't mind running this as well. And then, much like Chasm Skulker, we have its old cousin here, Lore Scale Kotal. 3 mana total, 1 colorless, green-blue, 2/2 snake. Whenever I draw a card, I can put a +1/+1 counter on Lore Scale Kotal. This gives us the ability to go tall in addition to going wide, put Rancor or Overrun on this guy, and he's going to get real big real fast. And then he'll just trample over, and that's the best evasion you could possibly give him. He also makes a very strong case for a card we looked at before, Wingcrafter, because Wingcrafter has the ability to grant him flying. And you give this guy flying, he gets very scary in the air. Especially with the amount of cards that we'll be drawing with this deck. We're not going to look at the mana base today. Mana bases are pretty basic, pretty straightforward. Especially for 2-color. Play what you can afford. I do like the manlands, though, for this build. So I'm going to take a second to feature the 3 of those, because they could become attackers and wind up getting you additional card draw. So we've got Lumbering Falls, enters the battlefield taps for green or a blue, and you can pay 2 colorless, a green or blue. It becomes a 3/3 green-blue elemental creature with hexproof. I like the resiliency of this card. When it becomes a land, it basically gains immunity to sorcery speed removal. And even when it becomes a creature, it has hexproof. So instant speed removal won't be able to hit it either. Great value on this card. There's a reason why this was everywhere in Standard before it rotated out, and it really does belong in this deck. On top of that, we have Ye Olde Classic, Treetop Village. Enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add 1 green mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 colorless, 1 green. It becomes a 3/3 green ape creature with trample until end of turn. This was really good in Standard. Yeah, the Slither Blade does look like it would be awesome in Skyrim. I completely agree. And then lastly, we have Faerie Conclave. Enters the battlefield tapped. They all do. That's manlands in general. Get used to it. Add 1 blue to your mana pool. Pay 1 colorless, 1 blue. It becomes a 2/1 fairy creature with flying until end of turn. So they all have some form of evasion or resiliency. Great combination for this deck. I would encourage everyone to include them. Here's a card that I'm probably not going to put in the deck, but I talk about alternate kill conditions all the time. This is currently in my mono green elf deck, and I'm considering putting it in here. It's Epic Struggle, 2 colorless, green enchantment at the beginning of your upkeep. If you control 20 or more creatures, you win the game. That way, if you're in some sort of a weird board stall, your opponent's just gaining too much life for you to keep up with, etc., you can still surprise them with a win. I like it in my elf deck. I also like it in my Sapperling token deck. It has potential in this deck. I'm not sure that it's as good as some of the other cards, though. So it's definitely higher on the mana curve than we want to be living with this deck. So we'll see when it comes to this one. No promises. Seems a little bit clunky, a little bit magical Christmas land. I mean, it depends on our board state, so that hurts. We, of course, have Throne of the God Pharaoh. This is a new legendary artifact from Amonkhet. I suppose new is a relative term. It's from within the last 6 months, I'd say. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent's loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. So it's just a way for us to sneak through even more damage, considering how aggressive we're going to be attacking with this deck. And you get exponential value because it's each opponent takes that damage. It's definitely a worthy inclusion in the deck. It's also in my elf deck, just because your mana dorks, when they tap, they trigger it. Got Fyndhorn Elves here. Another functional reprint of Llanowar. It's 1 green mana, 1/1 creature elf. Add 1 green mana to your mana pool. I like Fyndhorn Elves for this deck because it can help me get Edric out turn 2. That's all I really want from my mana ramp. Beyond that, everything else is going to be so low curve. I just don't care. Next up, we have Skull Clamp. 1 colorless mana, artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. Equip cost of 1. This is important just because in the event Edric isn't on the board, I can kill off any number of my little creatures to draw into the gas I need to win the game. You know this card is good because it's been banned in many formats over the years. It's a staple in what formats it's not banned in. It's definitely a worthy inclusion. Even, I talked before about how this deck probably shouldn't need additional card draw. This is so good that it's worth being an exception regardless. So we're going to go ahead and toss that down in the unnecessary card draw pile. Next up, we have some straight up removal with Beast Within. 3 mana, 2 colorless, and a green instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. Not only is it straight up removal for mono green, but at the same time, it's very versatile. It can destroy creatures, it can destroy planeswalkers, artifacts or enchantments, and lastly, what it replaces it with is a 3/3 green beast token that all of our evasion gets around. So at that point, it's a non-factor for us when it comes to us attacking in and hitting them over and over and over again. Love this card. It's definitely going in the deck. Just period. Here we have combination of Mana Ramp and Win More. It's Garruk Wildspeaker, ye olde Lorwyn version. It's 2 colorless, green, planeswalker, 3 starting loyalty. You can +1 him to untap up to 2 target lands, get your mana ramp. You can -1 him to put a 3/3 green beast creature token into play. So he's a potential army in a can. And his ultimate is -4. So you can do this the turn after you drop him. Creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. It's the exact same effect as Overrun. This guy basically does it all for us. He helps us go wide. He gives us mana ramp. He helps us win more. This is a perfect Planeswalker for the deck. I looked at a couple others, Kaora being a good example, but yeah, she doesn't synergize with what we're trying to do as well. Garruk is just perfect for what we want. Next up is Heroic Intervention. You're going to see this card all over Standard right now. It just adds resiliency to your creatures, which is important at all times. It's 2 mana, 1 colorless, and a green instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Saves them from spot removal. It saves them from board wipes. One of the big weaknesses of go wide strategies is the number of board wipes in EDH. If you can negate those board wipes, you wind up putting yourself in a very strong position where your opponent's boards have been eliminated, but you could just attack in with impunity. Not that they could stop us in the first place, but resiliency is good. It's just going to be a must-have for this deck. Swiftfoot Boots, we're going to start talking about protecting Edric. And this is one of the classic cards to do that. It's 2 colorless mana, artifact equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Equipped cost of 1. So Edric tends to be a lightning rod for removal. This is a way for us to make it so that it's much more difficult for our opponents to nix him off the board and keep our value engine going. Lightning Greaves is better at that. It's 2 colorless mana, artifact equipment. Equipped creature has haste and shroud, and equip cost of 0. So I can put it on Edric a turn sooner. Must have for this deck. Here's a card that's just cute. I've been trying to find a use for it since Hour of Devastation. This might be a good fit for it. We've got Majestic Myriarch, 5 mana, 4 colorless, green, creature chimera. Its power and toughness are equal to twice the number of creatures I control. At the beginning of each combat, if you control a creature with flying, Majestic Myriarch gains flying until end of turn. Same is true for first strike, double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelike, menace, reach, trample, and vigilance. So it has the potential to be a big, flying, trampling beater in this deck. Potentially a lot of value. Another Go Tall card, a little bit more inconsistent than Chasm Skulker or Lore Scale Codal, just for the fact that it is dependent on my board state. May not make the cut. It's kind of a clunky card, but I look at it and I want it to be good. And of course it's built for attacking because it only gains these abilities on your turn. Well, this is a built for attacking deck. So I feel like of all the decks that I have built or I am building, this is probably its best hope to fit in. Get some real use out of it. Put that in the win more pile. The unnecessary card draw pile got swept out of the way. Now we're going back to removal and disruption. We're almost through our cards here, so I'll try and make this quick so that we can get to the actual deck building elimination process. Pongify, 1 blue mana, instant, destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller gets a 3/3 green ape creature token onto the battlefield. Cool card, straight up removal, unconditional removal. The only drawback is that they get a 3/3 creature token, but it can't block our flyers, and therefore it doesn't really affect our game plan at all. Mystical Tutor, so that we can search up those win more cards. or the specific disruption spell we need. It costs 1 blue. It's an instant. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card. Reveal that card. Shuffle your library, and then put that card on top of it. Put that on the card draw pile. It's not really card advantage. It's actually a form of card disadvantage. But the ability to cut through your deck so quickly is just invaluable. Then we've got Swan Song. 1 blue mana, instant, counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller gets a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying. Okay, so unlike the other cards we've talked about, this one can block our flyers. The reason I still like it is you only have to leave open 1 blue mana and potentially shut down an opponent's Cyclonic Rift, opponent's board wipe, an enchantment that may or may not make it so that your creatures can't attack. All these are good things, so it's definitely a worthy inclusion in the deck. This is one of the most value cards in the entire format. I love it. Can't possibly get enough of these for my collection. Rapid Hybridization. 1 blue instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. That creature's controller gets a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token onto the battlefield. Functional reprint of Pongify, which we looked at earlier. If one's good enough to be in the deck, they both are. Plain and simple. Dispel. Classic card. 1 blue mana instant, counter target instant spell. Once again, just a very cheap and efficient way to counter our opponent's removal. Or their counter spells, honestly, which is always good. Thought Vessel is a mana rock with utility. 2 colorless mana artifact. You have no maximum hand size, which is important for us because we're going to be drawing a crap ton of cards. Add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Put that in the mana ramp pile. Forbid. I love this card. It's just straight up oppressive when you get it going. It's 3 mana total, 1 colorless, blue, instant. It says interrupt, but it's an instant. The old school terms. It has buyback. I can choose and discard 2 cards to put it back in my hand after casting it, rather than it going to the graveyard. And it's counter target spell. So it's cancel with upside. A repeatable cancel in a deck that's going to be drawing as many cards as this is obscene power, and it is a worthy inclusion to the deck. Now, I mentioned before I was playing way back in Invasion Block when they first came out with this card. Washout. 3 colorless mana and a blue sorcery. Return all permanents of the color of your choice to their owner's hands. I love this card because it's a potential one-sided board wipe. I'm only playing 2 colors. There are lots of decks out there who are going to be playing 3 colors or more, and there are three colors that I can name that won't affect my board at all. Or, as you've noticed, most of my permanents are blue. Most of my instants and sorceries are blue. This is going to be a predominantly blue deck. Something tells me I can name green and be relatively not affected by this at all. Obviously, it'll hit Edric at that point, but I could just send him to my hand and play him again for 3 mana. That said, yeah, that's the whole point. Chat's cracking me up over here. So, just wash out all my opponent's stuff. That it goes back to their hand. I continue attacking them with impunity. One-sided board wipes are one of the most important advantages in all of Magic, especially in Elder Dragon Highlander. So I look for them every opportunity I get. And back when this was in Standard, it was like the sickest thing. It was awesome. So I try to play it as often as possible. Speaking of one-sided board wipes, the best card in Commander, Cyclonic Rifts. 1 colorless and a blue instant, return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, or you can pay 6 colorless and a blue to overload it, in which case you cast the spell for its overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. Just means I wipe all of my opponent's boards and my stuff stays. It's the best one-sided board wipe in all of Magic right now. Period. Good card. Wins games. Definitely going in the deck. Another land card. I don't want to harp on lands too much because what you put in the deck will really vary based off of your budget. And at the end of the day, even basic lands are a really good choice, especially for a 2-color deck. Reliquary Tower, on the other hand, is a land card you can put down. You have no maximum hand size while it's in play, and it taps for 1 colorless mana. So you lose a little bit of color weight when you play this, but you gain the utility of never having to discard, no matter how big or how many cards you draw. And then lastly, we have Burgeoning here. Burgeoning is one of the very few non-artifact ways for you to get first turn mana ramp. It's 1 green enchantment. Whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is great early for the ability to drop Edric turn 2, but it's also awesome throughout the game because you're going to be drawing so many cards. You're going to be drawing lands a lot faster than you can put them into play 1 per turn. This gives you an ability to play a land almost every single turn of the turn cycle. And that alone is going to get you a lot of value. So I like this card a lot. It's going to be a must-have for the deck. All right. So first things first, I talked about our ratios before. Okay? When you build an EDH deck, you obviously have to take 1 card slot for your commander. Typically, you want about 38 to 40 land cards. And then you want 10 disruption cards, whether it be removal or counter spells. You want to have 10 mana ramp cards, 10 card draw cards, and whatever's left goes towards your main strategy. And at least 1 alternate kill condition. Now, in this deck in particular, we can take it a little bit easy on the card draw cards because our commander is going to be drawing us cards. And really, our whole strategy is going to continue drawing us cards. So we don't necessarily need to dedicate 10 card slots to it. The other categories, though, we will have to dedicate to. So I'm just going to go ahead and get to work on whittling these down. Let's start with our mana ramp here. And for anybody viewing this right now, we are upgrading to get some additional webcams actually after tonight. So you will get to see my face and interact with me a little bit more in future streams. But for the time being, let's take a look at our mana ramp options. Burgeoning is one of our top priorities, getting that in play because it has so much value. We just talked about it a second ago. Thought Vessel it comes a little bit late for us to get our creature, our commander into play turn 2, but at the same time, its utility cannot be understated. So we're going to put that in a separate pile, kind of the good but a little bit iffy pile. Findhorn Elves, Mana Dork, first turn. Nature's Will, kind of an oppressive card. It's more of a win more card than a mana ramp card. Same thing goes for Druid's Repository. I don't think there's any chance of me cutting either of those. Soul Ring, because Soul Ring, Mana War Elves, Elvish Mystic, Coiling Oracle. This one might get cut. It comes too late for us to drop our commander on turn 2. May not do enough for us here. Sky Shroud, Ranger, turn 1 Mana Dork. Gotta love it. Wild Growth, turn 1 Mana Ramp. Boreal Druid, turn 1 Mana Dork. The Mirrors, much like Coiling Oracle, they come too late. They're very fragile. There's potential to get value out of them, but I'm just not sure that it's worth a card slot in the deck. Simic Key Rune comes way too late. Potential for value, but this is definitely going to be one of the cards that we cut now that I see all of it together here spread out in front of me. Rampant Growth also does not do enough, comes a little bit too late. And Karametra's Acolytes, it's just too much of a win more card for me. Too situational, too fragile. I'm going to wind up cutting that one. So when it comes to our 10 mana ramp spots that I'm dedicating in the deck, all 8 of our first turn mana drop spells made the cut. Thought Vessel will also make the cut for sheer utility. Nature's Will probably get put in the win more pile, and Druid's Repository will round out the 10 spots. So we've got 10 mana ramp spells here, and that's going to be the basis of our mana ramp for the deck. Next up, let's take a look at the disruption for the deck, because frankly it's excessive. There's just way too much disruption here. I tend to err on putting too much disruption in a deck if I wind up having to cut cards out of the main deck, the main strategy. Then I'm willing to whittle it down if it means that I have really quality disruption. A key part of getting your game plan across is disrupting your opponents enough that they don't kill you first, or put a stop to whatever your game plan is. So Cyclonic Rift, Washout, Forbid are all musts. Dispel can get cut sometimes just for the fact that it is so limited. Rapid Hybridization, Swan Song, these are all very good cards. Beast Within is a must. I'm going to put Snap in the must category just because it's effectively free. Memory Lapse. What I should be doing is I should be sorting this into removal spells, board wipes, and counter spells. So rather than just sort this based off of general value, let's do board wipes with Cyclonic Rift, the best board wipe. Washout. Snap is single target removal. It's a bounce spell too. So yeah, we'll make 4 piles. We'll make board wipes, counter spell, removal, and bounce. Because if we're going single target, there's a big difference between removal that sticks and tempo plays. Swan Song will go in the counter spells. Rapid Hybridization will go with Pongify and the removal that sticks. Dispel will go in the counter spells. Beast Within goes in the removal that sticks. Forbid goes in counterspells. Memory Lapse goes into counterspell. Unsubstantiate. This kind of crosses over to be both a bounce spell and a counterspell, but ideally I want to use it as a counterspell, so I'm going to put it in that pile. Caustic Caterpillar will go in the removal that sticks. Juror, great counterspell, definitely going in the deck. Devon rolls Disc, board wipe. The Martyr of Frost is a potential counterspell. Potentially very good counterspell. Reveal X blue cards. This is going to be a predominantly blue deck, so that will work. Dissolve, another counterspell. Spell Pierce, another counterspell. Dismiss, another counterspell. River's Rebuke. Not the best board wipe, but potential one-sided board wipe, especially if I eliminate 2 other players before turn 6, which is possible, depending on how the deck runs. Void Shatter is a counterspell. Trigon Predator is removal that sticks. Counterspell is a counter spell. Okay. Aether Mutation is bounce spell with upside. Reality Shift is removal that sticks. Arcane Denial is a counterspell. Disdainful Stroke is a counterspell. Misdirection, I'm going to treat as a counterspell with upside. And Rewind is a counterspell. So what we're looking at is not enough board wipes. I mean, we've got, what, 4 board wipes here? It's not terrible. There are green board wipes. I looked at a few of them. None of them jumped out at me as being more viable than even River's Rebuke. Certainly not more viable than Devon Rolls Disc. I'm thinking I'm just going to leave these 4 board wipes in here. And try and kill my opponent fast enough that I don't need to use them. When it comes to removal that sticks, I'm more likely to run Reality Shift than Pongify and Rapid Hybridization. Not by much, just for the fact that in my meta, I see a lot of Indestructible, and Pongify and Rapid Hybridization will not affect those, whereas Reality Shift is an exile effect. Therefore, it can get rid of indestructible creatures. It can also get rid of regenerators, but so can Pongify and Rapid Hybridization. Beast Within is a must just for its sheer versatility. Caustic Caterpillar doesn't really do enough on its own. I'm not sure I'm going to keep that one. Trigon Predator is a must. It's going in the deck, period. Try and stop me. Snap and Aether Mutation are the only 2 single target bounce spells. Aether Mutation probably shouldn't go in the deck, but I think it's worth playtesting. So for now, I'm going to leave it. And that puts us at 9 disruption spells right there. What I could do is go 10 and 10 by putting Caustic Caterpillar back. I think actually the optimal build would be putting Pongify and Rapid Hybridization in over Aether Mutation and Caustic Caterpillar. What do you think, chat? When I eventually post this video on YouTube, feel free to leave your suggestions in the comments below. So I'm going to cut Aether Mutation and Caustic Caterpillar for now. And let's look at the best counter spells. Number 1 winner, Forbid. It's evil, and I like it. Thank you, chat. You are correct. Misdirection's probably up there just because we're going to have so much card advantage. We can afford to play this for free. And always happy to steal attention away from the jealous dogs in the audience. Okay, next up, let's see, Counterspell is just sheer value. There's no reason not to run it. Juror, sheer value. That's a definite must in the deck. From there, what counterspells I want to put in here becomes a little bit more subjective. These four are easy auto includes. Disdainful Stroke, of course, value counterspell that will hard counter anything mana cost 4 or greater. Very good in Commander, where you're going to see a lot of big spells, a lot of board wipes, for example. Rewind, potentially free, but I wind up having to leave 4 mana up in order to play this. That's not really appealing, especially in such a low curve deck. That might get cut. Arcane Denial replaces itself, but at the same time, gives my opponent's card advantage. Not appealing. Void Shatter counters that stick. Still a little bit high curve. Same thing goes for Dismiss. High curve, but replaces itself. Spell Pierce, a little bit situational, but so much value and can counter board wipes, which is going to be a big concern with my go wide strategy. So I think that's a must-have, actually. I'm going to put Spell Pierce in as a must-have. This is going a little bit more towards competitive build. I tend to do that, and later I will do a video on my background and my competitive gameplay background. Suffice it to say, I err on the side of competitive. Dissolve, counters that stick. Order of Frost. I think there's enough potential here that it's worth an inclusion, just because you're going to get so much value out of this card. It's going to really put your opponents in check. Swan Song, 1 mana, counter board wipe. Can't go wrong. I don't think Dispel is going to make the cut. It's just a little too narrow, and I seem to have a lot of other counter spells. There are a lot of competitive strategies where it would, but I'm feeling really good about the counter spells I have so far. I think I'm going to cut Dispel. Next up, we have Unsubstantiate. This is more of a tempo play. It's a sweet looking card, but might get cut. It's on my list to probably get cut. And Memory Lapse. Also more of a tempo play. Taking away a card draw is nice. It's the opposite of giving my opponent card advantage. You know, all things considered, I might just run the Disdainful Stroke and cut the rest of these sort of clunky counter spells, because I do want to leave enough card slots to have a very aggressive creature package. So right now I'm operating under the assumption I'm going to run 38 lands, which is the norm. This is going to be very low curve. I could potentially cut lands in this deck, but for now I'm operating under the assumption that I'm running 38 lands plus Edric, which means I have 61 card slots available, and my current deck count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So, let's take a look at, and I am not counting the man lands and utility lands as additional card slots. They will come out of the 38 lands that or 38 card slots I have allocated for lands. So let's take a look at our win war cards, because we have to be able to protect Edric. Lightning Greaves is a must-have. But Krufix, God of Horizons. Okay, Lightning Greaves. Give you guys a closer look at it. Is a must-have. Krufix, God of Horizons. He's a little slow. He's a little clunky. He's cool looking. He definitely gets the wow factor, but he's definitely not vital to our strategy. So I don't know if he's going to make the cut. Propaganda is a utility card that is really our only defensive play in this whole deck, other than our handful of counterspells and disruption. So in that regard, I can't really afford to cut it. Now, Bow of Nylea can actually be used defensively, turning my little 1/1s that I've been dropping into rattlesnakes in case I need to assume a defensive posture. It is modal. It's got a lot of coolness to it. I don't know if that's enough to make it worthy of making the cut. This is probably going in the iffy pile. All right, so in, possibly not in. So we've got in here, possibly not in here. Vencer's Journal. A lot of upside to this card, but it's kind of slow. I'm going to put it in the possibly not in pile. Beastmasters Ascension. It's just too vital. It's going to do too much for us. It's an absolute must-have. Robe of Mirrors doesn't do enough for me, in my opinion. It's too fragile. So for those reasons, I'm going to put it in the iffy, probably going to get cut pile. Bower Passage. This card's sweet. It takes our evasion with flying and makes it even more evasive. That's going in, period. Chasm Skulker is sort of an alternate kill condition in and of himself. He's he takes our go wide strategy and adds a go tall element to it. So he's going in without a doubt. Praetor's Council is a cool card. Probably not going to make it though because it's just so dang expensive. It's freaking 8 mana, man. It comes down too late for it to really matter. Rancor, I mean, it adds a form of evasion and trample. It can make my mana dorks and even my flyers more of a threat. And it makes my go tall creatures, both of them, more of a threat. So in that regard, and it's resilient. So in that regard, it's such a good value card. I really can't justify not running it. It's going in the deck. It's going in the deck. Overrun, it's going in the deck. Period. Or Scale Codal is our other go tall card. Going in the deck. Not as good as Chasm Skulker, obviously. But Epic Struggle, it's cute, but it's a little bit clunky, a little bit cumbersome. Relies on our board state reaching a certain point that we'd have to have a really stalled game to get some use out of it. Otherwise, it's a dead card draw. And we could get into quadrant theory here because that does factor into my decisions to a certain degree. But at the same time, quadrant theory is something that it's become so effortless to me. I rarely take the time to go through each individual phase of the game with every card. Throne of the God Pharaoh is just so much exponential value. I can't imagine not running it in this deck. Garrick Wildspeaker does everything I want, nothing I don't. Absolutely going in. Heroic Intervention is absolutely going in. No doubt about it. Majestic Myriarch. God, I want to find a home for this card. One of the great struggles of deck building is knowing that a card's not good enough, but wanting to make it work. And when it comes to Majestic Myriarch, it's a perfect example of it. Card just, I want it to go in, but it just sucks. We've got Swiftfoot Boots is a must. Protecting Edric. And Nature's Will is absolutely oppressive in this deck. It's going in. How many cards is that? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's a little bit more than I really wanted, because it takes away from the nuts and bolts of the main strategy. But at the same time, these cards are viciously powerful. We'll see if I wind up hitting my 61 card number or if I wind up having to cut even more from these piles. But so far I feel really good that we've cut a lot of fat and we have just the good cards. We'll see what the total comes to, and then we'll also check the mana curve before we cut this video. Let's look at the largely unnecessary card draw. I think Mystical Tutor is necessary. It's actually a form of card disadvantage, but at the same time, it lets me cut through my deck, find exactly what I need. So that's a must. Skull Clamp, it's a must. Just if Edric's not on the board for whatever reason, it lets me draw into the gas I need in order to get the deck rolling. Skull Clamp's going in. River Hoopo. I want to make this card work. We'll see if I can sneak this card in with the flyers to make this card work, because it has that potential upside as being a mana dump. But when it comes to unnecessary card draw, it's just too redundant. I'm not going to put it in. Mystic Remora is a super competitive card. I like it a lot. I'm not sure I'm going to put it in, though. I know the competitive players in chat or the watching this on YouTube are going to leave me a ton of comments about how I need to have Mystic Remora in here, because it is that good. It's just, it doesn't attack in. Opponents can play around it, and that cumulative upkeep can be very inefficient if you drag it on too long. That said, it's 1 blue mana for potential, 3-4 cards turn cycle. So I'm gonna run with it for now. We'll see if it makes the final cut. Fact or fiction, though, I'd rather just draw cards off Edric. It's getting cut. Treasure Cruise, it's getting cut. Charter Course and Elvish Visionary are all getting cut. Let's see if Hoopo can earn a spot amongst my flyers. So let's see how many card slots I have available. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay, so we have 17 card slots available. That's really not as much as I'd like for general small creatures. How many? Like, I've got a creature here. I've got my mana dorks. These guys. I've got a creature that turns into a counter spell. Really, I've got Hatchling too. Chasm Skulker and Lower Scale Coatl are creatures as well. So I do have a good chunk of mana present or creature presence here. Let's see. When it comes to unblockable creatures, Slitherblade, sheer awesome. River Sneak, lots of value. Triton Shorestalker. Phantom Warrior, though, is 3 mana for a 2 unblockable creature. I'm going to have so much more efficient drops, like 1, 2, and 3 drops. He just doesn't do enough. He's going to get cut. I wanted to feature him just because, you know, he is an unblockable creature, but he's going to get cut. Looter Core is almost certainly staying. Jesse and Infiltrator. Visible Stalker, it's a must. Gadul Lurker, can't be blocked. Mist Cloak Herald is staying. And Blurry Beeble is just getting cut. Because I don't want to have to try and plead for silver border cards in order to get him on the board. Or be allowed to play him. So right now that's 8. I have 9 regular flyer slots. Let's see here. I have 9 regular flyer slots, and I have a pile of cards. I don't know if you can see this. I'm guessing it's at least 20 cards thick. Memnite is not a flyer, but he is a value creature. Tattered Haunter just isn't enough value. I mentioned that when I looked at him before, so he's probably getting caught here. Aether Swooper, though, is 2 bodies for 2 mana. I like that. He's going to stay. Spiketail Hatchling, potential disruption. He's a little force spike on a flyer. I like that. He's staying. Oh, give me a second here. Sorry about that. I had to adjust my microphone. Merfolk Spy is getting cut. Period. Shrieking Drake is getting cut. Period. Shardling Sphinx costs just too dang much. She's getting cut. Cloudfin Raptor. I want to make it work, but it is just a little clunky, a little situational. So it's probably going to get cut. I hate to do it, though. Spire Tracer. Probably getting cut. Wingcrafter, probably getting cut, just a little too clunky, a little too situational. Viper is a 4-drop, comes down a little too late. I know it's an army and a can, but comes down just a little too late. That's going to get cut. Treetop Scout is getting cut. Silhana Ledgewalker is getting to stay. Hope of Garriper gets to stay. Siren Storm Tamer is definitely getting to stay because it's got the additional utility of countering something that targets, say, Edric or one of my other creatures. And then the fairies, I'm reluctant to cut any of them just because of Spell Scutter Sprite. Or Stutter Sprite. Ironic, actually. So, Now we get down to the nitty gritty because we have to weigh all of the cards that we've included in the deck so far against the potential cards that I want to include in the deck here. Right now we've got 5 that I definitely want in the deck, and 9 card slots, and then we've got the fairies, which are, oh, that's not a fairy, cut him. Well, there's 6, so at minimum we're cutting 2 cards that I don't want to lose. And there's no room for River Hoopo, which saddens me a great deal. So let's see what we can go back through and nix here. Martyr of Frost has the potential to be a very powerful counterspell in the deck, but he has no built-in evasion. I feel inclined to cut Martyr of Frost. He has no potential evasion, so nix him. Let's see, who else do we have here that can go? The Unblockables stay, the Mana Dorks stay. We just don't have enough board wipes to really cut any of them. Maybe in playtesting I'll find that I don't need the board wipes, but for now I'm keeping them. Honestly, I feel like our removal suite is hitting the sweet spot right now. And the mana ramp is in a good place. So, counter spells. I actually erred on the side of having too few counter spells. It's really the win more cards that I'm looking at to make some cuts. And so I'm going to backtrack a little bit here and take a look at Mystic Remora, Rancor, I hate to say it, Skull Clamp, because Skull Clamp is really only good at when I'm playing from behind. And I said I wasn't going to get into quadrant theory too much, but it's only good when I'm playing from behind. These are some of our more situational cards. I'm looking more for cards that will always be good when I draw them. So Skull Clamp is really predominantly only for one quadrant, and specifically phase of the game that I'm going to go to great lengths to try to avoid entirely with this deck. So I'm thinking I'm going to cut Skull Clamp. Rancor's good, but it's kind of a win more card. It's definitely a good card, don't get me wrong. In EDH, it's a little bit on the limited side, though. And then we have Mystic Remora. I can afford to draw more cards late. It's a vital card in a lot of EDH decks, but since I don't plan on dumping my whole hand first turn, I don't need it as badly as other competitive EDH decks, maybe that are looking to storm out. So I am going to wind up cutting it after all. Which means I've cut a total of 4 cards, which means I should have 2 card slots open. Let me count, make sure, and then we'll check the mana curve, make sure that it looks good. But I've been really erring on the side of low cost cards, so the mana curve should look good. That'll just be a formality, really. 1, 2, So yeah, we have 2 card slots available. And naturally, in the pile of maybe cards here, we've got River Hoopoe on top, just begging to be included. And I want to take another look at how many of these are just value evasive creatures, because I have to have value evasive creatures in this deck. I mean, that's the whole engine, right? Is the value evasive creatures. We've got the mana dorks. They're not evasive. They're obviously value, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Just 20. Plus another 7 creatures for other purposes. I don't know if that feels like it's enough. I'm going to cut Hope of Girper. It is potential disruption, but it's a little bit situational. And that gives me 3 card slots to play with. And oh, bless me, I sneezed. I wonder how that sounded on the audio track. I'm looking forward to revisiting this when I edit it for YouTube. Alright. So, Hope of Girper is cut. In favor of three card slots. I have how many here? 1, 2, 5, 6, 19 evasive creatures. I'm tempted to try and work Rancor back in because it is such a value card. Very tempted. Ultimately, though, I think I shouldn't. I can get Trample from Garruk Wildspeaker, from Overrun. I can tutor that up with Mystical Tutor. I can draw into them with Edric's card draw. Is it as reliable a source of Trample? No, but do I need Trample as often? Thank you, chat. Do I need Trample as often in this deck as you would most? Also, no. So, I'm gonna, against my better judgment, I'm gonna leave Rancor out for the time being and find 3 more flyers to put in the deck. I want to put Memnite in, I really do, because he's free, builds more board presence, but he has no evasion. And I would be better served putting 1-drop, 1/1 flyer in. So let's see what I have for 1-drop, 1/1 flyers, actually. Let's go through this pile of potential cards to put in the deck and see what I have for potential 1-drops. We've got River Hoopoe, which is a 2-drop flyer that is a potential mana dump late game. Really leaning towards putting it in. We've got Hypnotic Siren, 1-drop, 1/1 flyer. Vulnerable to enchantment removal though. Kitesail Corsair, 2-drop, 2/1 flyer when he attacks. He's a human pirate, which is not a non-trivial factor, but in this deck, we're not going to be taking advantage of that awesome creature type. By the way, we're totally doing it Admiral Beckett Brass video as well. Stay tuned for that. Treetop Scout I like because of his interaction with Bower Passage. The way his ability is worded, when Bower Passage is out, even creatures with reach cannot block him. So he's on the short list to actually make the cut. 1/1 flyer with upside. Not gonna make the cut. Too expensive. Wingcrafter, too situational. I like Wingcrafter with the our go tall strategy, but it's a little too situational. Spire Tracers, 1/1, Pseudo Flyer, Cloudfin Raptor, 1/0/1 that is a potential value creature, but too situational. Not going to make the cut. Shardling Sphinx, too expensive, not going to make the cut. Shrieking Drake, too many drawbacks, not going to make the cut. Merfolk Spy, not going to make the cut. And Tethered Haunter, too expensive, does too little for 2 mana, not going to make the cut. So we're down to 5 cards, 3 open card slots, 6 if you count the Rancor. I'm just going to set that aside. It's not going to make the cut here, so I will resist. But I want to put Rancor in because it's so good. I've done so many great slide decks and competitive decks with Rancor. My nature is that I want to put it in, but there's no reason to. So Memnite is not evasive, and while the value of getting a 0-drop creature on the board is always good, I'm not going to be able to take as much of an advantage of it in this deck. So for that reason alone, Memnite is taken out of contention. And it really comes down to Treetop Scout synergizes too well with Bower Passage, and it gets me more green presence in the deck, which is always good. I like that. Spire Tracker is like a fixed version of Treetop Scout, but at the same time gets me more green presence. Hypnotic Siren, we're not going to take advantage of the bestow ability really much, if ever. I would much rather have River Hoopoe will in fact make the cut. That's that. My last card to make the cut will be River Hoopoe, Treetop Scout, and Spire Tracer. All that's left now is the mana base and sleeve this sucker up and get to playtesting so that I can do a deck tech on this in the coming weeks. Stay tuned for that. And if you enjoy our content, please remember to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. You can also look us up on Facebook and Twitter. So, with that, I am signing off. This has been a live deck building. Well, we're going to skip the mana curve right now. And this has been a live deck building of Edric, Spymaster of Trest.